Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Morning, Nora. How you doing?
Very well, Brian. I'm just about to head off to Raleigh, North Carolina to do a little advanced movement principles for the upper body. It will be hot. It will be sticky, but I'm really looking forward to it. It's a really nice group, great group of people, great studio. I look forward to seeing a little bit of the East Coast, a little moment on the East Coast. How about you? How was your weekend?
I was going to say, wrong timing to come to the East Coast is all I'm saying.
Yes.
But you know what? It's actually not going to be that bad. The heat is going to supposedly dissipate. We had massive thunderstorms yesterday, so hopefully they will calm things down a little bit. My weekend was good. I spent it teaching. I was at Serene Pilates in Vienna, Virginia, teaching anatomy in 3 dimensions to a bunch of new students. And it was a lot of fun. It's always interesting teaching new students because you and I teach a lot of advanced things and a lot of advanced students. So people who have been teaching for a long time. So to be around people who are just starting, that there's in their infancy in their career path to Pilates, it's really interesting to sort of see where they're at and go, okay. Some people know more than you think. Some people know less than you think. And it's just an eye-opening experience to be reminded of that and say, look, we all started somewhere.
Absolutely. And just for any of you out there who haven't done the anatomy in 3 dimensions, if you're have any interest in anatomy really at all, this program has absolutely changed how I see the body, how I understand the body. I've taught it a billion times, as has Brian. And it's building the muscles in clay on a skeleton is like, oh, that goes there. Oh, that goes there. And I always say, it doesn't matter whether you know it or not, or even whether you can remember the name or even the place. Just the fact that you have an internal, like that kinesthetic sense of the structure is just really great. So anyway, I'm so glad you're teaching that, Brian. And I'm just super excited that you're kind of taking over that program and going to move it forward, because it really is so valuable for all of us in the movement professions.
Well, I think I told you the first time I took the class, you forced me to take it. I had walked in on one of your classes figuring, I'll hang out in here in the back. And you basically said, sit here and do it. Oh, yes, ma'am. And I did it. And I did 6 years of anatomy at university. I went all the way up as high as you can, pre-med, with all the other pre-med students. And this was the first class that I thought, oh my gosh, I am learning so much more on such a deeper level, because most anatomy is taking off. It's the removal of. Even doing cadaver work is the removal of. This is putting it on. So you start at the deepest level and build your way out. And that was mind-boggling, which is why afterwards I said, I got to do it. I got to teach this class. It just blew me away. So I highly recommend it to anybody who hasn't taken it. Take it, even if you have any interest at all in anatomy, any interest at all.
And very, very simply, like when you talk about the difference and how I think of the difference is, because I've done a lot of cadaver work and you've done a lot of cadaver work as well. That's a destructive process.
Yes.
And for me, it's a little bit like the difference of demoing a room in your house. If any of you have ever done that, demo takes a day, right? You just go in there and you just slash, burn, cut, slat, whatever you have to do, right? Throw the stuff in the dumpster and you're done with whatever you're doing. Creating is the hard part, like having to make choices and decide, well, does that go here? Does that go here? Is that this shape or is that this shape? That's where the learning happens, because you have to make all of those decisions with your hands, with your mind, with your brain, with the whole thing. And that's a creative process, as opposed to just tear them down. And again, dissection is incredibly valuable. Do not get me wrong. Seeing a real body and what the real things look like in a dead body is incredibly valuable. But this really put all the work I did there in context and gave it structure inside my brain that I can now use as my kind of internal roadmap when I'm problem solving or trying to figure something out.
And that problem solving is kind of what we're going to be talking about today in a great degree, because
Yes,
when
it
you
is.
understand the structure, when you understand what's going on and how everything attaches, like I say, I've taken so many different classes at university and you learn origin insertion, but until you actually see it and build it and see exactly, oh, it attaches on this part of the bone. Oh, so it does this. So so when the body's in motion, it does this and that. And it, as I said many times this weekend, no muscle works in true isolation. There are lots of
Yeah.
things helping it. There's so much happening. And you and I were talking beforehand, and you brought up the subject that keeps coming up in your, advanced movement principles, are muscular imbalances. And I thought this is a perfect opportunity for us to go a little deeper into that and talk about, some of the more common ones, but also what do you do about them? And how do you deal with that?
I get this question all the time. And as you
Yeah.
know, both fitness and Pilates have a tendency to be bilaterally symmetrical, like especially traditional Pilates or traditional fitness. Squats and lunges and things are done equally on both sides. And a lot of things are done with both arms or whatever. And one of the things that I realized early on, and I'm sure you did as well, is we all have a dominant side. We all have a stronger right leg or a stronger left arm. And it could be a little bit stronger or it could be a lot stronger depending on all kinds of things.
Yep.
And changing that, or even just trying to bring the weaker side back into a little closer to the other side so you have more balance through the structure, is
Yep.
actually way more challenging than I thought it was when I was a young teacher.
Yeah.
And some of that goes back to how our brains develop, right?
Hmm. Absolutely. It's amazing when you watch people move. The last client I had today, she's a big time mover. She's a Pilates
Uh-huh.
instructor. She is a big time mover, but she has some muscular imbalances as well. And I was having her do certain exercises and I was seeing, oh, wow, okay, there's, when you first see something, I think the first thing you sort of, as we look at something, is kind of like, sort of like a dog that hears a funny sound. It's sort of, huh? Your
Right.
head cocks to the side. You're like,
Like,
something doesn't quite
something's
look
off, something's different.
right.
Yeah.
And especially for people who are beautiful movers, there are some people out there who you could see their dysfunction from across the street,
Yeah.
a mile
Yeah. Yeah.
away. But when it's someone who is a good mover, and some of you are going to be working with dancers or athletes or whatnot, it's a little harder to spot sometimes. So you're sort of, do I see that or am I imagining it? So you have to sort of
Exactly.
dig
Yeah.
in and you ask questions. And you start piecing things together and go, oh, okay, that makes sense then. And you start, piecing things together again and go back to the anatomy, go back to motion and think, okay, how can we work on that? How can we work on just one side of it, so that we're
Yeah.
not going to be so bilateral? And I think that that's a great challenge and a wonderful thing that we get to do, but a lot more challenging than I think people ever think it's going to be.
Things that I notice. So I have a lot of little children around me, great nieces and nephews and stuff of various different ages, most of them on the younger side, and I've just had a really enjoyable time. Many of you have kids, know this, watching them develop, watching them learn how to crawl and then learn how to walk. And one of the things that I will never forget is watching one good friend of mine's child when they were probably 7 or 8 months, something like that. And they're really starting to kind of crawl and motivate themselves around the room on their belly. And this child from 7, 8, 9 months, somewhere in that range, was basically crawling with one side. Like reach with
Mhm.
the right arm, and then the left knee and hip would flex, and kind of they'd reach forward with that arm, and they'd pull themselves up, and the left hand would do about a quarter of that. And then the right hand would reach, and then the left hand would do a little bit of that. This was the beginning motor pattern for this child.
Mhm.
Right. And I could see, oh, that right sided dominance is happening now as we speak,
Yeah.
right? Is developing at that moment. And that was just so interesting to me because when I've worked with those dominance patterns in myself or with my clients, it is that deeply wired that one
Mm.
side is going to just be in charge and the other side will do what it's told. And that deep neurological wiring is, I think, why it's so hard to change.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's all in sort of nervous system based, that their nervous system just goes right, 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 left,
Mhm.
right, left, right, right. And that just, I think that's how it's built, how it's wired.
And if you think you want to go back to wiring, I forget who it was, but somebody a long time ago, probably in one of my university classes, said, okay, cross your arms. And everybody crossed their arms. They say, now do it backwards. And you could
Yeah.
literally see people not knowing how to put their arm, and finally they do it. And I think it might have been a neurologist who was talking, lecturing for this class, said, how did that feel? And you could just see everyone go, weird. Now do it with your legs.
Yeah.
Everyone has one side that is, and now that I've gotten older, you can really see it in clients as well as in myself. One side is so natural and just sort of floats over there. And the other side, a little stickier, doesn't move quite as well. And you can really see, wow, there's a lot of imbalance that occurs over a lifetime. But
Yeah.
your patterns that you do over and over and over again do really set you on a path. And sometimes you got to put up some roadblocks a little bit and say, okay, we need to reverse this path or else it's going to be this way literally forever.
Or even if you can't reverse it, at least like a lot of times, my experience has been it's really hard if you've got a real difference in the two sides to bring the lesser side or the weaker side up to match the other side. But oftentimes just bringing it up some just helps to balance those forces out. And so I talked about this being kind of like neurological development, but it also happens with sports. And I think about, two of the upper body athletes that I worked with, one who was a minor league pitcher and one who was a discus thrower. And watching them, like they both had trained heavily one-sided from young, right? From very young to a very high level of skill. And, I knew them 20 years after they'd given up those sports. But those imbalances were just profoundly still there. That right side was bigger. All the muscles of the arm and the leg were bigger. The right erector spinae were bigger on both of them. For a while, balanced body had this thing called a rocking reformer, which was just a reformer that was on these little. I remember that. And it was hilarious because if I put either of them on the rocking reformer, it would fall to the right. Because literally the right side of their body was that much heavier.
Wow.
In this case, from their earlier activities. And clearly they were dominant on the right side anyway, which is why they threw with that side. But it was just interesting to see that. Like, oh, okay, this is kind of deeply ingrained in your structure as we speak here.
And what you do regularly, you talked about sports that are very unilateral. Coming from Hawaii, I've worked with surfers. And for them, they have some of the best developed lats I've ever seen because it's a lot like the butterfly stroke, but they have great thoracic extension because lying on the board, they have to lift their head to watch the wave.
Yeah.
And they're using both arms simultaneously. It's not one after the other for the most part to generate power. You see them really a lot of times using both arms.
So it really is almost butterfly-ish. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of them, not all, but a lot of them will do that, especially as they're really powering through. And their lats are their shoulders, their scapula, everything seems to be fairly well balanced. And on the other side, I had a client who was a professional bodybuilder. She'd gotten her pro card. And I've probably told you this story before. I was looking at her neck and one side of her trapezius was a little larger than the other, her right side. And we kept looking at that thinking, that looks very odd. Because it was significant, but she's very bilateral. You watch all the exercises she does. And one day I said, I'm just going to watch you work out, and literally followed her around. And I realized that every time she did tricep work and pull down work and things, she did it on a certain machine because she liked the way that the lights hit her body in the mirror. And so she could appreciate her form at this mirror really well. And so she always cocked her head to the side throughout the whole.
Oh my God.
Every repetition. And I'm watching this and I went, this is it. And she said, what do you mean? I said, try it on the other side of the machine. And you could see she was uncomfortable because she had grooved this. Again, she'd been at this for 15 years or so at this point.
Right.
So, and the same thing over and over and over. And she realized, wow, something that subtle. But again, she's building muscle and her head is cocked to the side the whole time, observing herself, created that imbalance. And we sort of, okay, now we have to sort of see what we can do to balance that out, because I'm not sure if we can undo 15 years on one side, but we did our best to try and balance things out. So you
That
can
is a
see
great
bilateral
example of
versus unilateral.
detective work. Right.
Oh, you
That's
got to
great
watch them.
of detective work, right? And it's also a great example of what Eric Franklin says, which is practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent.
Yep.
Whatever you do, whatever little things you do habitually over time, 15 years of that particular pattern does something,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Repetition changes things. Wow.
Yeah, and I see it all the time working with clients. I can often tell you if they work on a laptop or if they work with their
Yeah.
monitor slightly to the side on their desk, or therapists. Okay, you're going to cross. You're right-handed. You cross your left leg over your right leg. You rotate toward that leg, and you write on that thigh. And so they have this curvature and this roundedness, and everything is twisted, thoracically to the left. And you watch them and you try and put them on something that is unstable, and it starts to turn. Literally, I've put them on things before where they're on a balance disc that's on a very, thin point, while holding on to something, and their whole body starts twisting, and they're like, what's happening? What, where am I going? What? And because they're not trying, their bodies are at
Right.
rest, but those patterns begin to take shape just by holding on to some balance things. She's like, I'm turning. Why am I turning? I was like, nah. Well,
Because it's built
that's
in,
what's
baby.
going on. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's funny to watch because it's like, all right. And you can see they go, what happened? I said, okay. And balance, and those balance discs are wonderful that you put someone on that,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden
Yeah.
their feet will start twisting, and they're like, I'm turning. Why am I turning? I don't know why I'm turning.
Or you try to have them say, okay, so now rotate to the right, like do the twist, like we do these on rotator discs all the time. And it's
Yep.
like one side's like, wait, I can go this way. And you try to go the other way. They're like, they look at you and they can't actually, they keep trying to go, but they keep the same direction. They can't even get in the opposite direction.
Yep.
Right. Because
Exactly.
those things, again, those are built in.
Yep.
Another situation that happens in terms of just creating imbalances, certainly habit, motor control, all the development things, but also after an injury. So, I think of a lot of my clients who've had something like serious knee surgery, ACL repair or something. And so they've been, number one, injured for a while before the surgery. So probably
Yep.
limping or not putting as much work on that leg. Then they have the surgery. They're typically not doing a lot for a period of time. And by the time you may get them after that, or years later sometimes, you will still see a deficit from that surgery that could have been 5 years ago. But that leg never quite caught up.
Mhm.
And especially if it wasn't the dominant leg before. If it was the dominant leg before, I find it will sometimes catch up. If it was never the dominant leg, it's like it will
Yep.
just lag a little farther behind where it used to be.
And it can be so significant that a lot of times after, when I get someone and they've had a surgery, like, let's say their knee, I'll literally measure right to left their quadricep bulk,
Mm-hmm.
because that is the easiest way. And I've seen upwards of multiple inches, 2 to 3 inch differences between sides. Because is it visible from the front? Yes. If you know what you're looking for, you can see that one's slightly smaller, and you wouldn't think that many inches it would be, because it just looks, because you're looking at it from one angle, oftentimes from the front.
Yeah.
And yeah, that side looks a little smaller, and down towards the knee is usually a little bit more narrow. You can see it come to more of a point. They don't have as much bulk. And then you do the measurement. Usually I do exactly halfway up the thigh to start with, and sometimes I'll do a quarter away up the thigh as well to see if vastus medialis, that sort of thing. And you can definitely see a huge difference sometimes.
Yeah.
And they don't even notice it. They don't even notice it. I say, you don't notice that your jeans are tighter on one side than the other? Oh, I didn't even think about that. But yeah, I guess they are. I said, okay, this could be part of the reason. So that's one assessment that I'll do for that body part. You can do it for the upper body as well, biceps, triceps, measure that bulk as well. And sometimes you can spot it and think, ooh, okay, we need to work on all of this.
And one of the things that I do a lot for the center of the body is look at the erector spinae. In any kind of prone exercise, or in our little standing multifidi work that we do. If somebody's prone, let's say they're doing prone pulling straps on the reformer, or they're doing a swan somewhere, they're doing some kind of back extension work, and you look and you'll see like one side is much more developed than the other. And so that's, again, upper body, lower body, center, all of them. And one thing is all of them can be consistent, or you can have those diagonal patterns, right? Where right arm and left leg are the
Yep.
pattern. So it's always looking at, is it just one side, one limb, one side, or is it a cross body pattern? You know, where are they in terms of those imbalances?
And sometimes you'll have the imbalance, especially with the spine. I find the erector spinae, you'll see one side might be a significant amount of hypertrophy when they're lying in the prone position. You can feel on their back, one side is a lot higher. Now, that side might actually be weaker because that side might be locked up. That may be where they've had the pain for years. You don't know that. We're not here to diagnose that, but you can definitely see, all right, there's definitely an imbalance between the sides. One side is a lot larger than the other. So either it's going to be stronger or there's dysfunction there. So that's when the detective work can say, which side has been, did you have a back injury? Which side did you? And oftentimes they'll say, oh yeah. And when they explain it, you say, okay, so we need to work on this side. We need to stretch this side more. We need to work on the other. And that's when you really do have to sort of be very detective-like. But truthfully, that's one of the best ways you can do it. You just put your hands on it and you'll feel one side
absolutely. You'll feel it.
significantly bigger.
If there's a difference, it's pretty obvious. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So now those are like all the many things that come into one-sidedness, all the many reasons. Now, what do you do? What strategies do you use in your programming to work on that? So let's first talk about kind of limb imbalances. Because I think they're a little bit easier than core imbalances.
Very much so.
Where do you go? How do you progress? Talk me through your strategies.
I believe first of all, I'm going to work a lot harder on the side that needs it. So if, let's say they've had we're going to say it's on their non-dominant leg. So they've had knee surgery or hip surgery on their left leg. It's their non-dominant side. And I see a difference in quad bulk. I'm going to work that side probably 3 times more than the other. And when I say that, I mean unilateral work. So if they are already out of pain and we don't have to do a lot of those basic exercises, I like things like lunges and step ups and all of that. But I may do 3 sets on one side to 1 set on the other to see if I can eliminate some of that. I still want the other side to get strong. Don't get me wrong. But I will still focus on getting that side to catch up if possible. If possible.
So basically more reps, more sets on the weaker side. I think that's absolutely useful.
And that might be if they have a significant imbalance in this regard of, let's say, strength. If I do a single-legged, leg press or a single-legged squat or whatever, and one side, their dominant side or the side that's stronger, let's say they're able to do, I'm just going to round up and say 100 pounds on a leg press type device on one side. And the other side is 75 pounds or something. Well, truthfully, I'm going to try and max out the weaker side, but I'm not going to necessarily max out the stronger side because I don't want both of them getting stronger at the same time.
Right, you don't want to keep that imbalance going.
Exactly.
Right, just keeping that imbalance going, but both sides getting stronger. Yeah.
Right, but I will still challenge it. So if its max is that 100 pounds and that's what they're comfortable doing, whatever number of repetitions I've decided, I'll keep them there for a while because I don't want them to get weaker. I don't want them. Right. I don't want the other side to be the limiting factor because then you'll see not one side get stronger and the other get weaker. That's not good. So I'd rather have no. So I keep that side at where it is. And then I focus on the weaker side. And like I say, I'll do at least 2-to-1 ratio, a lot of times 3-to-1 ratio to see if I can catch up or at least get them closer to balance. Quad bulk may never come back 100%, especially if it's in the non-dominant side. But if I can get the strength back at least so that they're pushing equally on both sides, then okay, that can be a huge game changer for how they function in life.
Absolutely. So I think that for me is like the beginning point, right? Is just working working the less active side or the less dominant side or the weaker side more. And in Pilates, this means working on single-sided work, asymmetrical
Mhm.
work, which we don't always emphasize in Pilates, but that's where I go. Single leg footwork, single leg knee stretch, single leg footwork on the chair, things like that. Now, one other thing that I found, which I've also found to be pretty useful, is having them focus on the less active
Yeah.
side in all of their bilateral work. So
Mhm.
just like, let's say they're doing a squat or they're doing footwork on the reformer with both legs, just think about the less active side. Just think about the
Mhm.
left side or the right side, whichever one it is. And then keep focusing on that. Just pay attention to that less active side. I found, like, for things like feet and straps, where single leg feet and straps are relatively advanced on the reformer for somebody who
Mhm.
doesn't have a lot of core stability. So I'm not necessarily going to do single leg feet and straps, but I might say lead every movement with your weaker leg. So if you're doing
Mhm.
circles or whatever, just think left, think left, think left. And they'll find generally, like, oh my God, that leg is so much more tired just
Yeah.
from the mental focus on it. So that's another technique that I use a lot in terms of just trying to get that balance going a little bit more.
And something that I notice, especially when I do bilateral work, if they're in a machine or something like that, they're locked into position. Even on the reformer, a lot of times they're going to be more
Yeah.
locked into position than if they're doing a free squat, for instance, or getting up out of a chair or something like that, where their body, they have to stabilize from the ground up.
Yep.
And do they lean? Do they shift their weight from one side to the other?
Yep.
And I'll let them do a couple repetitions because sometimes their body's just trying to organize. So that can take a repetition or two. But 3, 4, 5 reps, those numbers, I start watching and I'll put their awareness as to what I see. So with my client this morning, when I saw that there was a little imbalance in her hips, I wanted her to focus more on that side and put her attention
Right.
into it. And
Yep.
again, she's a mover. She understood exactly what I said. But sometimes it's as much as I want you to think about pushing a little harder with your left leg. It could be something as simple
Exactly.
as that.
Yep. Yep.
And, or can you see your belt? I, a great thing to do is if they can wear a belt, or if you have a belt that you can put around them and make sure it's even on both sides based on, where their hips are, and say, okay, I just want you to watch this belt as you do this exercise. And do you see it tilting to one side? And they go, wow. Yeah. Say, okay, let's keep it balanced. Let's try and keep that straight. And what you're going to find is it's going to reduce their range of motion, because a lot of people
Hmm.
have something in their head about, I need to do this to full range of motion, whatever that is for the person. I'm not saying
Right.
right or wrong.
Yep.
They
Yep.
may have some preconceived notions. So I'll say, go half that. Go half that. As soon as I see that start to change, I say, okay, that's your limiting factor.
Stop.
Let's stop there.
Yep.
And let's do 20 reps. Let's try and groove this. And you put your focus on the weaker side. And I find sometimes having that visual, because not everybody's kinesthetically aware, but having that visual can actually
Helps a
make them
lot.
say, oh, I see that. I see that.
Yep.
And that
Yep.
really helps, especially when you get into some core stuff and pelvic stuff and, hip stuff, because you're going to see that belt line start to sink one side to the other. When they're doing certain exercise, you'd be like, okay, to get that straight, get that belt line straight. Come on now. Or tuck in your shirt and you can see it at their belt line of their pants sort of thing. Say, I want that balanced. And that can bring them aware visually. And sometimes that can really make a world of difference.
So that brings us to kind of the second key principles, right? First one is just do more on the weaker side.
Yep.
But what you're talking about here is not just that, it is improving the movement pattern on the less active side.
Yeah.
Right. So that's that next level, right? First thing is just do more, because I think doing more is part of it for sure. But the other one is doing more better, right? Not
Yes.
just doing more, but doing it better. And
Yeah.
so for me, one image that I often use there is the idea that, like, your two sides are two individuals. They're not twins. They're not identical twins. They may be fraternal twins. So when I've got somebody who really has those imbalances, I said, rather than thinking of this as the bad side and this as the good side, because that's almost always a language every client will show up with.
Everyone.
I say, okay, so this is Louise and this is Alice. These are my own particular right and lefts. And I say, now, when I'm working on my right leg, which for me is my dominant side, what does it need? Like, just ask the question, like, what do I need to make this side work its best? It needs this, this, and this. When I go to my weaker side, what almost everybody does is, like, first they just get frustrated and angry. Like, why doesn't it do what the other side does? Like there's all these really weird, not helpful psychological pieces, right? Well, you're just stupid. Like some party is going, this side's just stupid. Why isn't it doing what it's supposed to do?
Why can't you do
instead
that?
It's like, okay, exactly, you idiot. So instead it's like, what are you doing? What do you need to do this better? And as an educator, as a teacher, I'm also looking at what do they need on that side to do that better? Because sometimes that dominance is because they have more hip range of motion, so they can't control it as well. And maybe they have less ankle range of motion, so they can't go as deep in that squat. So all their mechanics are different on that leg, right? So it's not just the difference in more, but also why. If there is a why is that leg not working as hard? And is there something I can do to help it work harder? Increase stability, increase mobility, work on alignment, correct some other piece of the situation.
And that in my brain comes down to the next stage of sort of detectiveness, which is, okay, what exactly is the imbalance? Because if we just say, let's say we're working with the thigh, for instance. Well, a lot of people say, well, it's obviously going to be, one side versus the other. Well, maybe, but is it the quadricep? Is it a part of the quadricep, the lateral or medial? Is it quadriceps versus hamstrings? Is it the adductor versus the abductor? There's a lot of balance that happens within that one limb. And sometimes one of those is super strong, but another one is the weak link. And unless you can sort of identify that and say, oh, wow, yeah, you're actually not weak in your abductors. Your glutes are actually fairly strong, but your adductors, man, they just are they are not nearly strong enough. Exactly. So it's affecting everything else. But if all you think about is, I need glutes, I need my glutes to be stronger, well, that might be part of it. And at the beginning, it is just, okay, we need growth strength. But down the road, you have to really sort of figure out, okay, what else is necessary? What of all those muscles, which is the weakest link? Let's start focusing on that one specifically.
Right. So we've just gone from a gross general do more on the left leg or do more on the left arm or whatever it is to improving the movement pattern and identifying why that movement pattern is or isn't doing what you want it to do, to that next level of, okay, a deepening of that. Which part of that area isn't working for you? Right. And then trying to correct that as much as you can, that precise imbalance. I mean, a classic thing I think of is a lot of the diagonal patterns that you're actually stronger on your left quad and your right hamstring. Right. That there's oftentimes those kind of patterns, or even more commonly, your right abductors and your left adductors are dominant and your other two are like out to lunch. If there's a little hip imbalance or there's a little hip shift or there's a pelvic rotation, any of those things are going to create those kind of imbalances. And those are more subtle. Right? Like in that case, okay, I've got to really get your left abductors going and your right adductors going, for instance. And then working on like not just more on one leg, because the left side's acting weaker, not just more on the left, it's more of these on the left, more abductor work on the left and more adductor work on the right. So that's, again, we're just like deepening those layers of understanding to try to get as focused as we can. But in all those circumstances, you need to do more of what isn't working.
Absolutely. And I think those are some of the things that people miss. And you said it perfectly. When you're looking at the lateral line, well, that right gluteus medius may not be strong, but that often means that left adductor group is also not quite as strong. So, but people don't see that side. So all they're doing is working on the gluteus medius, doing all the sideline work, stepping sideways, all of those type of exercises without addressing part B, or even part C. It's not necessarily the primary, limiting factor, but it's contributing to it, especially in walking, in balance work, in stepping up, stairs, all of those type of things. And people don't always put that together. So like you said, if the quad on one side is strong, the hamstring on the other side may be, well, reverse that and maybe focus on that a little bit. And though you're right, those diagonal patterns, when we see those, it's sort of, okay. So if you see one thing that's, shortened up on one side and not really strong, see if the other side, if there's something missing there too, because that diagonal pattern might be it.
And that gets us into a bit of, like lower body. We've talked in many different things about assessing and understanding that. This gets into the core a bit, because that's where
Mhm.
you really see those diagonal patterns a
Yes.
lot, right? Just as you talked about your wonderful case example earlier of the rotation.
Yep.
So if you are familiar with the balanced body language on this, the anterior and posterior oblique slings, or the muscles that go from right shoulder to your left hip and your left shoulder to your right hip in the front and in the back, those are really what control and manage the rotation of the torso. And very often, just from daily life, from driving, from mousing, from, as your point, being a therapist, from pitching, you get really wound up in one side and not in
Mhm.
the other. And that creates different forces through the spine, different forces through the neck, different forces through the hips and everything else down and up the chain, right? So that's that next piece, is then how do you look at those rotations and how do you balance out some of that in the core?
Yeah. So let's talk about the oblique slings, because I think
Yep.
understanding those is very important. And I find the posterior oblique sling is usually the weakest, because often
Yep.
a lot of spinal, rehabilitation work with people. So the glutes oftentimes are going to be one of the culprits. They're not that strong, but it's the opposite lat. So if it's my right glute that's not strong, and you can often see that, again, if you put them in a prone position, one side of their glute looks like it's hypertrophied and the other side looks like it's kind of saggy. Oftentimes
Yep.
that gives me an indication, oh, I need to focus on that side a little bit more. But
One other
at
one
the
other
same
way I sometimes think, one other way I see that is when people stand up, you'll see that the hypertrophied glute, that gluteal fold, that bottom of the butt, is higher.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So just, again,
absolutely.
you see it prone, but you'll also just see it standing. Just want to throw that out there. Carry on.
So when we're talking about that posterior oblique sling system, a lot of times what I'll do is I will want to, again, do more rotation work, shortening that side. So after I've already worked the glute, maybe I've done, and you can even do this through bridging. If you get to the point where you're doing one-legged bridging, well, guess what? If you push down with the opposite arm into the ground, and I like to do it with a bent elbow. So I'm pushing my elbow into the
Mm-hmm.
ground. I find that gets
Right.
a
So
little
you're
more
kind of
lat.
like your back of your whole upper arms in it. Yeah, me too. I
Yeah.
agree. I like
A
that
lot of
too.
people will push with their hand, and that's okay. But I find that they start rounding their shoulder. Yeah,
I find
exactly.
the hand gets more pecky, and if I really
Yes,
push back, I can get more latty. Yeah, agree. Posterior
exactly.
shoulderish.
And it's a little bit more of an isometric, because the range of motion is quite small within the hip and you're really being isometric in the lat. However, it can begin to wake that area up a little bit. And then once it's woken up, I can take them to doing some standing work. And I love doing standing work where I'll take them into a staggered stance where if it's their right glute that's weak,
Mm-hmm.
I'll take the right leg back, left leg forward, and I'll do a row with my left arm so that every time I pull with my lat, guess what? My glute is also going to have to stabilize on that side. And I'll add rotation on that side, adding more rotation. Because again, we have a tendency to think of rotation being for the core, for the abs, and we do forward flexion with rotation. But we really want to do more rotation in an upright position, because if I have to open the refrigerator, if I have to close a door, if I have to, whatever I'm doing, I'm often going to be in a standing position. Rarely am I
Yes,
lying
exactly.
down.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I like doing
exactly.
the unilateral work that way, and I will do 2 or 3 sets on that side versus 1 set on the other. And again, it's mainly for the core, so I'm not necessarily thinking about I'm building my posterior shoulder girdle on that side. A lot of times it's more about the rotation, and it's just
Right.
groove that rotation, and I'll do a lot of repetitions just to remind the body, this is what I want. So I might do 20, 25 repetitions with a medium weight, not anything too heavy, and change from cables to springs to bands to everything, because every resistance is going to feel a little bit different.
And so I love that. I love absolutely how that works. One of the things that I focus on a lot with those imbalances, like you, is the posterior sling, is just thinking about that, back shoulder to the back opposite glute. And I
Mhm.
even work on that, just that imagery in any kind of oblique abdominal work. And kind of my favorite way to do that is putting a small inflatable ball under the rib cage, support the head with the hands. Just, you're in a curl position and you're not all the way up. You're like halfway up into your curl, and take your rotations from there. And this is more about the lat, but this also gets a little bit into the glute. But basically, it's like working on rotating, but instead of thinking of front shoulder to front hip or front rib cage to front hip, opposite side, I think of that back shoulder to that back hip, and also think about really rotating from the spine and keeping it centered. And when I even just add that cueing in to any of my oblique work, number one, people tend to go a whole lot farther, like they get more range because they're using more of the body. They wake up that back sling, which is usually pretty sleepy in that position because you're slightly flexed. And it also really helps to keep the torso more centered over the pelvis. If you think of most people when they do an oblique abdominal of some kind, they really side bend a lot.
Right? A lot of side bending.
They tip back and forth, and that's usually what you'll see. And this, especially with the ball, really helps them to have that rotation be a little purer around that rotational component and getting that back sling going. But I love the standing work. I think is really the most effective. Our version of that, all you Pilates people, would be like standing on the end of the trap table with the springs. Same idea. We can do all that work.
Yep. And you can even do it on the reformer, standing off the reformer to the side with a relatively light spring, and do it that way as well, because then it turns it into sort of a cable machine, but you're using the springs. Your range of motion is going to be not as great as, let's say, a cable machine or a band. Just be aware it's going to get hard faster, but it is another option that you can use in the Pilates world. I have something I wanted to bring up with you, and a little sidebar here. Okay. Talking about the posterior oblique sling. A long time ago, someone mentioned that doing opposite arm and leg raise is really getting at the posterior oblique sling. So you're quadruped, you're down on all fours, you lift one leg and the opposite arm forward. And it made sense. But at the same time, you're really lengthening your lat. You're really not shortening your lat. And so I've had many conversations and arguments here. And something that I'll sometimes do is, instead of having them take the arm forward, I'll have them take it out to the side instead. So they're getting a little bit more. I don't have them rotate. And if they have one side that's weaker, I'll just have them hold that side for 5 seconds. The other side maybe hold for 1.5 seconds, and just have them do a little longer isometric hold in that regard. And I kind of wanted to hear what your thought was on that being the posterior oblique sling when the arm is going forward, when you're stretching out the lat and not necessarily contracting it into the, opposite glute. What do you think?
I've had that thought many times, and I have.
You too, right? Okay. I'm not the only one. I'm not crazy.
No. And I've kind of like walked around that conflict in my brain. So, well, how you do that? You just like, and you just zip around that little doubt that shows up in your head. So yes, I have had exactly the same moment. So let's think about that. One thing that I think about is, as a general thing, is that the slings are, the way that I've kind of taken them from Diane Lee and expanded them slightly for my own purposes and for our purposes of movement. The slings are again still metaphors for all the things that are involved in those moves. And I know when I'm going to lift up let's say I'm in all fours and I'm doing an opposite arm and leg reach or bird dog, whatever you want to call it, and I'm reaching my right arm up and my left leg up, I am definitely activating the back of my body from that right arm to the left hip. Right? Lat is maybe part of that. It may be contracting in an elongated state, right? Because it is elongated there,
still
but
stabilizing.
It also can be, can be active there anyway. And of course, other things are working. Our retrospinae and, our posterior deltoid, a lot of other things are kind of in action there. And so some of me just thinks, well, it may not be exactly the muscles that we talk about for the posterior oblique sling, but I also think about swimmers. All right. Because again, you've worked with swimmers. I've worked a lot with swimmers. And Their lats are gigantic, to your point with your
Mhm.
surfers, right? Their lats are gigantic. And yes, a lot of it is that stroke, that crawl stroke or that butterfly stroke, right? Arm forward, and then you pull back with the lat. Well, there's a piece of that again comes up overhead and then comes back down. And
Mhm.
so that lat is in action. It's sort of eccentric, concentric, or right, concentric, eccentric, concentric. And part of my feeling is that works eccentrically as well as concentrically.
Mhm.
Maybe.
And
I don't know. It's a thought.
yeah, the gang, we're literally spitballing here. And the only reason I
That's
bring this
right.
up is because this is something that Nora and I would do on a regular basis, throughout our whole careers. We'd sit there and say, I've been thinking about this.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
this is something that I never brought up with you. And I thought, you know what? This is a good opportunity since we're talking about this. What I've told people, because I've had students ask me this, is I say, think of it as an anti-rotation type of exercise. As soon as I lift my
Oh,
arm up
yeah.
on that side and the
Yep.
opposite leg, my body really wants my limbs to go down. So I have to elevate that to prevent that rotation. So I say, so technically, I'm working those muscles of rotation on, the torso, the upper torso on one side and the lower torso on the other
Mm.
side. So it's more of an anti-rotation static hold. And when I've explained that, I've
That
gotten people
works.
thinking, oh, okay. Now, again, could I be making something up and pulling something out of somewhere? I
No
don't
doubt.
know.
However, if it works
But
metaphorically, it might be
it
useful
made sense in my
anyway.
brain. It made sense in my brain at the moment. And I just said, okay. And I played with that again. I also will teach that move with the arm out to the side because it also
Mhm.
challenges more of that rotation. So it adds to that derotation factor. So these are just, again, I wanted to throw that out there because we are talking about correcting those imbalances. So if you
Yeah.
can have them hold longer on one side when you're trying to get the posterior oblique sling, for instance, you can really sort of get that to wake up a little bit more. So maybe a 3 to 5 second hold versus a 1 second hold on the other side. Uh, I find that sometimes can just wake it up. And I think for the
Yes.
core, especially when we're talking about the slings, we're not always talking about a hypertrophy situation or a strength
No.
situation as much as it's a neurologic and a reprogramming and patterning situation.
Exactly. An activation and coordination situation.
Yeah.
And what I liked what you were just saying, and I wanted to amplify that just a little bit. One of the
Mhm.
things that I do a lot is things like isometric holds for an area that's asleep. Whether it's a vastus medialis contraction for the quadriceps, or in this case, it's like a rotation where you hold that rotation, or an anti-rotation like you're doing, being on an unstable surface, for example, or what you're just talking about, and just holding that and feeling what's working in that moment. And I do this honestly, I do this all the time on myself with my particular imbalances, is I just hang out on the side that doesn't do the job and try to
Mm.
figure out like what isn't working. What, this is just from an internal perspective, but I do it as a teacher as well. What's not working? What's different on that side? Can I get that energy moving through, let's say for me, it's my left bicep is wacky and my left bicep tendon is always a little wacky. Like, can I get that energy move there? Can I hold that and then find that scapular placement, for example, and just find it and then maybe move out of it and then move back into it. So it's also that self-identification of where the differences are, and then again
Mhm.
isometrically waking them up and then working them. And that wake up and then work is another classic thing for all of this, because if you've got a weak side, or particularly like with the rectus spinae, if you don't wake it up, it won't do the job.
Yep.
It will never wake up on, all these things will not wake up on their own, has been my experience. So you have
Yep.
to do something to give them a little slap in the face to get them to actually pay attention. Then they'll start to participate in the move. But without a little wake up call, sometimes they don't ever really wake up. They just don't.
And I think this sort of goes on to the next point. For me, which is awareness, I want
Yeah,
to make the
always.
client aware of what are you feeling. Let's face it, our clients in general, and maybe some of you even out there listening, aren't really aware of how your body feels, what's working, what's not working. People sort of sleepwalk through life, and it's
Yeah.
because they're just moving unconsciously, which is fine. In a perfect world, we would all move perfectly through an unconscious movement pattern. Unfortunately,
Yes.
we're not all perfect, and that's okay. But to bring someone's awareness to it, and you just said it yourself, when you hang out there, you're asking yourself, what do I feel? And sometimes you can do it through body sense where you say, can you feel this with this arm? How about the here? Put your hands on both hip bones and do this movement. Do you see how one's not working the same as the other? Oh, yeah, I feel that. Or can you feel how one side of your erectors just bulges up really big compared to the other side? When you can do that and give them that awareness, suddenly you're giving them the responsibility so you can give them homework and you can say, okay, we're going to work on this and you're going to do this for 1 minute a day. Don't give them too much
Right.
because obviously they won't do it. But by making them aware and putting them into the giving them that responsibility, and so that they're taking an active part in their healing, their recovery, or their, trying to lessen the imbalances. I'm not going to say eliminate, but lessen the imbalances to hopefully get them out of, some dysfunction. I think that's valuable to give them that.
It's critical. And to your point earlier about the belt, it's like if they can't feel it internally, can they see it visually?
Yeah.
Can they, can you put them on a roller where they feel like they fall over to the right, or it's harder to balance on their left? Like enhancing the proprioception through vision, through internal sensation, through putting them on unstable surfaces, through
Tactile.
changing the pressure, tactile with your hands or their hands, like all the different ways that we've talked about in other podcasts about helping them to feel it. That's
Mhm.
the key thing. Because if they can be aware that their left arm is not doing the same thing as their right arm, for example, then if they're aware of that more of the day, then they can take different choices of how they pick that thing up, how they,
Mhm.
maybe they always lean on their right arm, right? Maybe they start leaning on their left arm, or to your point, they cross their arms one way. What if they cross their arms the other way?
Yep,
If they always
exactly.
mouse with their right hand, what if they mouse with their left hand, right? So just finding those ways to bring that awareness to their daily activities, because that's, when you change habit, you change bodies. If
Mhm.
you can change what they do every day, you can change everything. If you don't change what they do every day and you only work with them that 1 or 2 hours a week, you make some change, but not the same way that you will if they're paying attention more of the time.
Yeah. I find with that too, you gotta make them care
Oh
because
yeah, it has to be
if
meaningful.
it has to be meaningful, that's a
Or
great way
why
to say it.
bother? Yeah.
And we may see the imbalance and we may think, oh my gosh, that's the reason that X, Y, and Z is happening. And that's the reason for this and this. And we can see it. But unless they buy in and they believe it and they see that there's value in doing this thing that I don't know why I'm even doing this, but they say it's okay. One of my clients this morning was talking to me about physical therapists. She will email the physical therapist, I want you to do this and this at home. And she's thinking, that has nothing to do with this. And she'll do it. And she says, it helps. I said, exactly. It's okay. Just do what they say sometimes. And you don't always have to buy in. But now she's worked with this physical therapist for years and trusts them, knows,
Right.
okay, they say to
Exactly.
do it. I'm going
You
to
were
do it.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have to find that same level of trust with the client that, okay, this is going to help. And it's not going to take all day. It's going to take you a minute or two a day. But once you sort of establish that trust, then you can say, okay, now I want you to do this. And they're just going to do it without questioning everything. Give them a reason,
Mhm.
but they may not be as, doubtful or I don't know why I'm doing this silly thing. So you got to make it meaningful. And then when they
Yeah,
start seeing a little bit of progress, then they will buy in even more. That trust begins to build
absolutely.
when they have success.
Absolutely. So this was a wide ranger. There's a lot of things in
Mm-hmm.
here, and a lot of I think pretty practical things, because again, we work with these imbalances absolutely all the time. And that first step of
Yes.
just do more, just do more on the weak side. Figure out what the differences are in the movement patterns. Like, why is that side weaker? Maybe it's an old injury, maybe it's whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
an activity they do. Try to really identify where that imbalance is coming from: mobility, lack of stability, lack of strength, what's it doing. Hone in, really, really be precise, and then awareness and buy-in for the
Yeah.
client. Those are all pieces that we want to bring together whenever we're working on imbalances.
Yeah. And these are all practical. These are things that you can do with your clients because you're going to need to. You're going to need to, or even on yourself. If you experience, we all have imbalances. Let's face it, we all have imbalances. I've been working on mine for years, and I'm sure you've been
Me
working on
too.
yours.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
we all have them. I mean, we're not 12 anymore
We're
where our
human.
bodies are sort of, yeah, we're
Oh,
human.
we're
And we
human.
have these patterns. But when you can do that and make yourself even aware of it, you can start to make some significant change and some growth. And so
Yeah.
hopefully we've given you some ideas on ways to begin to progress in that direction. And hopefully it'll help. That's at least what we're continuing to try and do for ourselves and our clients.
That's right.
Oh, well, thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Hit that like and subscribe button. As I say every week, we really appreciate it. Like I say, about 30% of you are regular subscribers. We would love it if every one of you would hit that subscribe button. It would help us out a lot. So please do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. If you see us on Instagram, give us a comment, give us a like. We really appreciate it. We're Moving Convos at Instagram. If you want to get in touch with us, movingconvos@gmail.com is the best way to get in touch with us. If you have any suggestions of show topics or any specific questions, hit us up. We'd be more than happy to talk with you and maybe discuss some of the things that your guys are thinking about. So until next week, for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll see you then.
Hi guys.